everyone. I'm Asha. I am part of engineering leadership at Meesho and I lead the marketplace team. I'm an alumni of IIT BHU Varanasi and from the batch of 16. So before we dive deeper into the topic, I would like to take a minute to talk about Meesho and what we do there. I'm not sure how many of you are known to this, know about this company and what we do. So Meesho is an e-commerce marketplace built for India. Our mission is to democratize internet commerce for everyone. We today serve more than 150 million annual transacting users. And we house more than 80 lakh sellers with more than 100 million product listings and powers 40% of all of India's logistic 3P order volume. And cool. And the tech that powers the business is no less. We are a tech-first company and take a lot of pride in balancing scale with stability. Today we serve 2.2 million BAU RPS at an average latency of less than 50 milliseconds. We maintain a lightweight Android app with a size of 13 MB, while we serve static content like images worth of 24 PB through CDN. Our ML feature store serves 500K RPS at 15 milliseconds, which enables us to do real-time ranking on our app. Now taking a step back, during my journey at Meesho, so I joined Meesho in 2019 as an SD2. So at that time, we were doing around 25K orders per day. And today we have clocked on our last Diwali sale 8 million orders per day. And that's where the most of my learnings and the content for this talk is also coming from. So we've witnessed a massive scale post-COVID where we had to take a pause and put all hands on the deck to stabilize the system, stabilize the product. And that's why I relate to this topic a lot. So without further ado, we'll proceed to the discussion. So I'll provide some examples from my experience as well. So you will find a lot of examples that I'll use are from e-commerce because I am from that domain. Yeah, so something that we faced, it's visible for you folks, right? Okay. So one challenge that we continuously faced was the need to re-architect the systems as we grew. Because every time you fix something, there is something else that's coming up, you have to re-architect again. So that's how this talk is covering about how to navigate through those. Again, it is not providing a one-stop solution. Yeah, you should do this and it will be done. This talk will be providing strategies, what you should apply, what you should not apply your scenarios as well, and the balance will give the best for you. So we'll keep it focused on 3 aspects because of the time crunch as well. We'll talk about applications, databases, and caching. So yeah, let's move on to applications. So the journey begins with a monolithic architecture model, a foundational approach for all developers. In the beginning, it's all good. Everything is at one place. You will find the code that you're looking for in just a couple of clicks. Any table, any data that you want is a query away, and it will give you a very lower server cost too. So what's so bad about it? Sorry. Am I still audible? Okay, cool. So its limitations are particularly in terms of scaling, and also it's not just in terms of the RPS that it can provide, but also in terms of maintaining all the developers and all the pull requests that get raised against the same code base. So that's the overhead of maintenance that this architecture provides, this architecture poses. Now, what's this all? So many of us would have written a monolithic application in the beginning and would have transitioned to a microservice as a solution. And because it addresses the scalability woes, I'll skip explaining the part why microservices and what are its features because you all know about it. However, the part that is tricky is how to strike a balance between creating a new service for everything that you need out there. Or maybe we can put it in a way that when not to create a microservice. So if you don't, you may not realize the consequences until you find yourself managing more services than your developers. That's where we are coming to this problem statement of what is the right granularity for any microservice. Before you get on to like create one, what are the aspects that you consider before we plan for the next change? Yeah, so we'll look at two aspects. One is when should you break something and create split it into multiple, and the next aspect when you should consider putting it back together. This is the first one. So this is a no-brainer. Many of us would want to group a bunch of logical group workflows and then create one microservice out of it. So you can consider it as like the smallest unit, logical unit that's out there. One example could be inventory management, for an example. So for an e-commerce app, inventory is touched at multiple places. There is a seller who would be adding inventory, which increments the inventory. Then there could be an order can be happening, which will come and decrement the inventory. Then on the app, whether you want to show the product or not, for that you have to see whether that inventory exists or not. So because you don't want to surface out of stock products. Now in this entire flow, rather than putting these pieces at multiple different places, you can consolidate it all together and put it into a microservice, and you can be that entire flow can be streamlined. You want anything to do with inventory, go and talk there. So that is one use case where we would want to break it. Next comes to code volatility. So when you are rapidly growing, you would want to make changes to like one particular flow again and again, or maybe you would want to experiment and see what's the right fit, or maybe run parallel experiments. So over here, what we have is we can take the example of checkout, the order checkout that we do. So while on the payment screen, you would have seen different apps tend to show payment options in a different way. Different apps have different ways of showing you offers so that user understands those offers. So something or the other is changing on the checkout page always. But it need not really change the actual checkout that is happening at the back, where you are talking to a payment gateway in case of an online order and taking the payment. That's a stable flow out there. So over here, separating the view layer from the actual payment gateway part can give you stability to that to the payment gateway part, so that any changes that are happening on the view layer is not affecting. Like a bug introduced there will not tamper anything over here. So this is an active use case of maybe splitting the services into two. Third, which again is a most common one, is when you have different scale for different workflows. The feed that you see on an app and the checkout that happens on an app both happen at a different scale. Users tend to scroll a lot more before placing an order. So definitely there's a scale difference. So over splitting cart management from feed generation makes sense over here. Two other special cases over here, which are fault tolerance. This is not a common use case, but if you have a use case where one particular workflow is just on fire, like something or the other is breaking on it, and it is affecting the neighboring areas as well. So on a temporary basis, maybe you can have a different deployable for it, different microservice for it. Over there, you can keep sanity to the rest of the flows. Last part would be security. Over here, security is when one part of the flow needs much more secure ways of accessing than the others. For example, there's some credit card information that you're managing somewhere in the app, and you want two-way SSL to be there before accessing anything over there. So go for a different microservice so that you need not add the same overhead to the rest of the flows. So now let's come to the second part. When should you consider putting things back? So over here, the first would be database transactions. So in a monolithic world, we never had to worry about transactions getting distributed because everything was there in that same particular repo. Everything was accessible from there. Now, when you split it into microservices, the tables can go to like different under different microservices, and over there, in order to handle one full operation, you may have to talk to two services and get some write operations done. So that's where you may get into a situation where you have to do a distributed transaction. While distributed transactions are pretty okay. However, it can get tricky at times. So that's where having a governance will help. Second would be around data dependencies. So here, it's actually very easy to break code, but it is difficult to break data. So applying governance over which service should own what data and why can help to avoid scenarios where service A is overly dependent on a table that service B owns. So that's the other aspect that you should apply. And last one is around workflow and choreography. So what happens here is when you have way too many services to execute like one particular workflow, your inter-service interactions increase, and those increase with a latency and reliability overhead. Service A calling B calling C to give an output to the client poses challenges on availability and reliability. So governance over the number of handoffs will be helpful here. So this is one example. It's pretty much self-explanatory. This is where, because the first, when you want to break it out, that you would have breaking one particular service into multiple, you would have seen at multiple places. But putting it back together, this is one scenario where a registration of a new customer was split into two services, and there were two operations happening. Every write had to happen at one in the profile info and in security info, which made it a distributed transaction. Over here, putting it together into like one service would ease things out because of like a streamlined transaction. However, this is a scenario, again, you have to think through. If it makes sense for your setup, then only you should go for. This is just an example. So when you are splitting it, it should not be so granular that for every operation out there, like for example, one unit of operation, like registering a new supplier, customer. Now that if that is going to multiple microservices, you will end up in a situation where you have to do multiple writes. So service A will do a write into their own database, then pass on some information to service B. Now you do your job. That also has to do a write in its own database. Now both these writes has to succeed. That's where you get into a distributed transaction scenario, where if one write fails, you have that overhead of now going back and correcting in the first database as well. So this scenario of moving into a distributed transaction, this is the part where you should apply governance. Is it an overhead that you're okay with or not okay with? Oh, by the term governance means like your understanding and what you are okay with. That's all. No, it's no tool or anything. It's just what is right for you. It will be there. So for example, if that was like one profile service which hosted everything of that particular user, then it would have been okay. It's like one service talking to multiple tables. So it is anywhere in that the same domain. You are not at least splitting it into two. There will be some amount of coupling, but at least it will be within the same domain. Yeah, and again, this is not a capsule way of like a solution for anything. These are thoughts to apply, and then maybe at scenarios there will be scenarios this doesn't make sense. You will still go ahead and break, and that is perfectly okay. Yeah. So in any scenarios when you break it up a lot, so if there is a case like your client is calling for some particular feed, like give me homepage. Now service A is asking someone else, like give me banner. Service B is asking someone else, give me banner ka content. So this could be like A calling, B calling C, and then finally the response coming back to the client. Now this will have an additional latency and also a reliability problem where if C fails, what should A give back? So these are scenarios you can end up if you have way too many services in the same line. So over there, applying the governance of how many handoffs you should have in a particular workflow helps. That's all. Shall we keep the questions till the end, because I'm a little skeptical that the content will not be covered in the next 30 minutes. Cool. Cool. So we were on the so we talked about the granularity of the services. Now another aspect that you can apply is how to connect these services. So over here, what we have is first aspect would be communication. Over here, you can have asynchronous communication and synchronous communication. And in this entire architecting world, it's all about trade-offs. So that means what are you willing to trade off at the, what are you willing to optimize at the cost of something else? That's all about the architectures. So over here, decision between synchronous and asynchronous can be made by evaluating trade-offs between scale and feedback loop. Because this feedback loop is something that you are not optimizing in case you are going for an async communication. Second aspect over here is consistency. So over here, similarly, decision between strict and eventual consistency can be made by evaluating the trade-offs between scale and the need for transactional behavior. Actually, I'm not reading out everything that's on the slides, okay, right? Cool. And the third aspect would be coordination. Here, again, the decision between orchestration and choreography can be made by evaluating the trade-off between server cost and fault tolerance. So over here, orchestration is one part. Over here, error tracing will be much, much easier because there is like some central body sitting and controlling it. However, now if you want to support a higher scale in an orchestrating model, everything in the same line, all these lines have to be scaled equally. That makes this a costlier approach if there's a scale use case that comes up, while this is much more decentralized. Service A, if it needs scale, it can alone scale over here. The problematic area over here would be tracing the error. If something went and like failed in C, how will others get to know? That's the problematic part. Again, this is something to evaluate. If your product, what is the best approach for your product? We'll move forward. So I just wanted to walk you through one example over here. It covers multiple aspects from the slides earlier. There is this one aggregator service that's sitting. It needs to talk to all 5 to give a response back. And this is a pure orchestration model. So now there is a use case where the scale on this is becoming 5x. That means everything, the scale on all these will become 5x. That means each of these services will have to be scaled and increased server cost, of course. So over here, on evaluating some of these data, like for example, pricing data, inventory data, offers data, they do not change on a second to second basis. So if you can pre-compute it and store it at this aggregator layer, you can reduce the scale that comes onto all these 4. So this is a mix of asynchronous and sync communication with workflow choreography versus orchestration model. So what the proposed approach over here would be to populate all these information to a database, and this particular aggregator can solely depend on this database, and only for some additional data which are changing on a per second basis, where the updations will be too tricky, keep it only real time. The rest can be managed through an asynchronous setup, where this entire thing is pre-populated. That's over here. So this is an application of those 3 concepts that we just discussed into like a problem solution. Before we move on to the next topic, I just wanted to quickly touch upon, so there are other scaling approaches as well to improve the performance of your applications. Containerization is a known thing. Then high performance languages are out there today. Like people move to Golang, Java 19, virtual threads. So all those things can also be leveraged to increase the performance of your applications. We'll quickly go to databases. So here, the first question generally is, what is the right database for your service? And over here, I'll walk you through all the parameters that you should be considering while taking the decision. Again, it's again a strategy that you need to apply. So over here, first thing that you should consider is, what are your query patterns? Is it just a key value based, or is it more than one key value? So if it is just a key value based one, you can simply go for a Redis, DynamoDB, or S3 or GCS. However, if you need more than, if you are dependent on maybe one more of a 2 key or a 3 key kind of an approach, something that you can go for is Cassandra or like DynamoDB again. However, if you want to like query on a lot other fields, relational databases give much more like space over there. Finally, in case you need fuzzy search, over there, the capabilities are heavily provided by Elasticsearch or Solr. And the next aspect is consistency. Over there, the question is, Do you really need strong consistency or eventual consistency? Okay. So in places where you need strong consistency, relational database are the ones which offer better performance. And wherever eventual consistency is fine, we can go for any horizontal databases that do the work just fine. Third, you should consider about storage capacity. How much storage you need. So most database systems are limited by the amount on the disk that they have, and the performance struggles whenever you have like immense storage at the back. So over here, if you need infinite storage, cloud solutions outshine. So over there, solutions could be like S3, GCS. They'll do the work for you. And fourth is around performance. What is the needed throughput and latency that you want from this database? Again, over here, all databases performance degrade as the amount of read-write increases. So that is when the resharding or reindexing, these kind of solutions are explored. So over there, a database which gives solutions out of the box would be like a better fit for you if you need high throughput and latency. High throughput and lower latency. Over here, solutions could be Google's Bigtable, open source Scylla, or DynamoDB. Again, coming to the fifth, this is special case if you choose to self-host the deployment. Over here, something that you should consider is how mature that solution is and how that community is out there if you need any help, and how confident you or your DB team is about that particular tech stack, so that you don't get into like any scale challenges later, because migrations are heavy. And if you plan to go for managed solutions, something to consider is cost. So in case of cost, most of the databases charge you on the basis of number of reads or writes that you take from them. So understand your requirement and then have a plan accordingly, so that which is sitting in line with your read-write requirements. Okay, so this another example of how the database landscape evolved for us in Meesho. We started with a big, huge MySQL at the back. Everything was done by MySQL. Today we are over here, and here, so there is a lot of personas which are there on the right side. For key-based retrieval, we have Scylla, Cassandra, Redis. For C-search, there is Elastic. Transactional and consistent behaviors are done by MySQL. For heavy performance, we have Bigtable and Scylla again. Redis for caching use cases. Any static content, infinite content, that's GCS. And while in these two, we also like tried self-hosting Scylla and MongoDB. Cool. So now we are just talking about once you like pick a database and you move forward. So this is something generic for all databases out there. Initially, when you start with the same database. You put all the data in like one physical machine, and let's just navigate through all the problems that you make, the approaches that you can take from the start. So in the beginning, you will be mostly fixing the querying, connection pooling, so that you can get some quick wins out of the existing physical machine itself. Like some changes on the application layer can give you those benefits. Moving on, so this will be able to get you past the immediate scale challenges that you face. Post that comes database scaling. Once you have like fixed this connection pooling, query indexes and things like that, if the database is still not performant, people generally tend to upgrade the hardware. It could be a vertical scaling, it could be a horizontal scaling, but then scaling helps over here. And post that, it will give you some more relief, but however, scaling has its own downsides of having higher cost. This is where the next approach that comes in is where CQRA is where you segregate the commands to like different places. One common use case is master slave in RDS. You would have seen multi-primary strategy again, where you like separate out writes at multiple places. And moving forward, the next comes up is partitioning, where you partition your data by functionality and keep it at different physical machines. So that if you are just talking about orders, only one particular physical machine is taking the load for it, and not something that is handling inventory. And the fourth comes sharding. So within the same functionality itself, how can you compartmentalize data further and keep it separate so that you can have focused search on a group of data, even within the functionality. Something could be like in orders data itself, you shard it by months and have a month specific data, so that any queries, any order search will go to the index on the first particular month and will do the further querying. So these are different ways you generally tend to, like some the companies evolve when they grow. These are the strategies they keep on applying to scale their database. Can it? We lost some time also in the beginning. I'll take 5 more minutes. We'll quickly cover caching as well. So what are the caching use cases? I'll move a little faster now. So the general 4 use cases that we use are, one is database caching. So generally, this is an approach to scale your database again, like cache some of the frequently used queries onto like some distributed storage. So some select queries, because RDBMS, at least whenever you have the same queries again and again, and if it has enormous data, it slows down. So having a query on a select query helps here. Second is to manage spiky loads. Whenever you have like a sudden spiky load on the app, examples could be flash deals. Many e-commerce apps run flash deals where suddenly a lot of users jump onto the app. However, these can be handled with like CDN caching on the app itself. You need not really scale your infra for it. Third is session store. These are used everywhere wherever web sessions need to be accessed again and again. This can be stored on a cache. And coming to the last, which is CDN caching. In most of the apps, all images and any JS files are cached on the CDN itself, so that the retrieval is faster. The applications do not have to take the brunt of it. The data transfer is of lower cost as well. So this is one example I want to talk about. This is where in the current app of ours, we have implemented feed fallback through CDN. So what happens over here is, whenever you are serving a feed, in a best case scenario, whenever a feed is getting served, we also sample it and keep it in CDN through, So we sample it and keep it in the DRS through the CDN. So over here, first we sample, because the production data is anyway so huge. So we will just keep for every search term maybe like 10 outputs and keep it in the CDN, so that if in any if an unfortunate incident happens and our primary APIs are down, so this CDN can take up the data from there and we can still serve the app, so that our users are not impacted. Users will not understand like there's a production issue at the back. For them, they'll see a slightly outdated feed. Yeah, you may not have the best ranking out there, but that experience is taken care of. So that's where we have used CDN to power a feed fallback. Coming on to the last topic is to how to scale your cache. Again, I'll just put everything together. So first up, for a cache is about key value management, because all caches are generally in memory, and memory is what affects performance and as well as cost. So over here, wherever you have key value pairs, having smaller keys with characters less than 10 always helps. They have better performance. And on keys, rather than having storing the large keys as is, rather go for serialization or like compress it with LC4 or ZST. These algorithms help, which can cut down the data storage by like maybe the memory usage maybe by 5x or even more than that. And if the cache supports data types, then use those, because they are out of the box and they come up with a lot of optimizations internally. So Redis has it. Redis has list, set, sorted set. So if your data makes sense, use those. Second up is query optimization. So over here, whenever you have round trips to the Redis, in the same API call itself or in the same workflow itself, try pipelining those queries so that the round trip is reduced to just one. And you can also try out server-side scripting with Lua. One Redis-based example would be to, for example, comments like delete. Whenever you want to delete a key, delete is an expensive operation than unlink. Unlink will not, what it does is delete the reference. Unlink does not delete the reference. It keeps it to a later, just like RGC. So this helps in improving the performance if you have a lot of deletes happening. And third is about TTL. One is not having TTL is itself a bad strategy for any caching. So having a TTL is the first optimization. And second is to avoid scenarios wherever all keys are getting expired at the same time. So if you have like a cron based approach of like maybe populating keys, and if you set up same TTL for all keys, then there will be one instant when all keys will expire by that time, and then that Redis cache hit ratios will go down. So avoid scenarios like those. Coming to next is hotkeys. This is again avoiding hotkeys with client-side caching or in-memory caching. There are libraries like Caffeine out there. Sharding, not explaining sharding because most of you know it's just data compartmentalization. And the last is cache tiering. So these are like some out-of-the-box solutions given by some of the cache partners. So over here, you basically rotate data between in-memory and SSDs to have a lower cost. So not everything is in your in-memory. Some part is kept in the SSD, and like 80% in SSD, 20% in cache, in memory, through according to your access patterns. This is a cost lever actually, and one example is Redis on Flash. I think that's it. Thank you.